Tonight, many of America's farmers already feeling the pinch are worried about the possibility of more challenges.
And we're going to lose another generation of farmers.
Americans once believed that as long as there was wheat, the United States would always be the backbone of the world. But by mid-2025, everything had changed. For the first time in modern history, U.S. wheat was rejected by a series of countries. From the Philippines to France and Italy, contracts were canceled like a silent warning the world no longer needs American wheat. In Canada, in less than 6 months, Canada became the new preferred destination for millions of tons of wheat, a spectacular role reversal right on North American soil. The result, thousands of tons of U.S. wheat left in storage, billions of dollars in losses, while farmers even had to burn their fields because they couldn't sell their crops in time. What really happened? Why did the world begin turning away from U.S. wheat one by one? Watch today's video. And note that this information is compiled from statistical data, not intended to defame any organization. Number 1. The Philippines. Millions of American farmers once believed that if there was any country that would always choose American wheat, it would be the Philippines. Now they know they were wrong. In May 2025, the Philippines, once one of the most loyal customers of American wheat, unexpectedly canceled a 12,000-ton order. Just days later, they signed a contract for 110,000 tons with Canada and Australia. What seemed like a simple supply chain adjustment was, in reality, a heavy blow to America's agricultural heartland. It wasn't just about losing a contract. It was about losing trust, something many farmers once thought untouchable. There was a time when the Philippines consumed around 3 million tons of wheat annually, and for 2 decades, the U.S. supplied 80 to 90% of that demand. In 2024 alone, wheat exports to the Philippines brought in nearly 750 million, yet in Q2 this year, wheat exports from the U.S. to the country dropped by 38% year over year, causing an estimated loss of $240 million in under 2 months. What's notable is that the U.S. is offering wheat prices $8 or $10 per ton cheaper than Canada or Australia, but customers are no longer choosing based on price. In internal reports, milling companies in Manila described American wheat as high risk, unpredictable, and prone to disruption from political factors. For each ton, they're forced to add $9 to $12 in extra costs, higher insurance, longer shipping times, and the risk of canceled orders due to failure to consolidate shipments on time. At regional trade conferences, Southeast Asian supply chain representatives emphasize that long-term contracts with the U.S. have become unfeasible due to uncontrollable mid-term risks, from tariff changes to immigration restrictions impacting logistics. Businesses don't want to sign contracts dependent on political volatility across the ocean. U.S. Inland ports have grown quieter than ever. North Dakota, Kansas, and Nebraska, the top 3 wheat-producing states, have all reported surging inventory levels. In Kansas, some silos recorded a 42% increase in stock compared to the previous year. Shipments are no longer arriving regularly. Some freight trains were even canceled while waiting for loading, due to a shortage of workers to complete packing on schedule. This is partly the result of aggressive ICE crackdowns. After tighter immigration policies, thousands of seasonal workers vital to harvest and transportation have vanished from the fields. Many farms in Kansas, Oklahoma, and southern South Dakota are facing severe labor shortages, doubling harvest time and even forcing some fields to go unharvested. Some farm owners have begun burning their own crops. The workers once tied to the harvest are now gone. The trucks that used to run through the night collecting grain are no longer returning, and the dominoes begin to fall. The irony is that those who once strongly supported strict immigration policies are now the direct victims of their consequences. No workers, no shipments, no contracts, and now, no customers in Manila. The price of Pandasol, the beloved breakfast bread of millions, rose over 11% in just 3 weeks. No one blames American farmers, but when forced to pay more for every loaf, consumers simply make the obvious choice: get it from somewhere more stable. Wheat from Canada and Australia began arriving at southern ports without delay, without needing political risk waivers, and without fear of some new legislation turning everything upside down the next day. The The result was stunning. Canada secured over 230,000 tons in contracts in just 2 months. Most of it from markets that used to belong to the US with straightforward operations, no internal turmoil, no surprise taxes, and no abrupt labor crackdowns. They've become the ideal trade safe haven in the eyes of Asian buyers. When even the most loyal customers no longer choose the US, the issue isn't wheat quality, it's the reliability of the supplier nation. No one builds a business future on risks coming from a legislative chamber. And when the US government still hasn't aligned on trade, immigration, or export tax policy, the only thing the market learns is find somewhere safer. The Philippines is not the only country, but they are the first to clearly turn away. After decades of loyalty, it's not out of resentment, but out of necessity. And when forced to choose between risk and stability, between lower cost and predictability, they choose the latter. When the first containers from Canada arrived at Manila's ports in June, there was no celebration, but people still ate bread as usual. No price hike, no shipment delay, no canceled orders. It was a quiet victory that the US once had and is now losing. And perhaps what happened in Manila is only the opening act. Number 2, France. Few people notice, but for decades, a part of the soul of French bread has come from the golden wheat fields stretching across the American Midwest. North Dakota, Kansas, Montana, places where, every summer, millions of tons of hard wheat are harvested, finely milled, and shipped across the Atlantic to Europe. The French didn't choose American flour for its price, but for its reliability. US wheat has an ideal protein content, offering the light chewiness and crisp crust that perfectly suits traditional baguettes, croissants, and brioches. From the end of World War II to the early 2000s, France's major bakeries often prioritized American imports to maintain consistent quality. In fact, during years of domestic crop shortages, the US was once a backup source that kept factories running without compromising the familiar taste French consumers expected. But in 2025, that changed. Not because the French forgot history, but because they no longer received what they once trusted. This spring, France drastically reduced its wheat imports from the US, the lowest level in over 2 decades. According to EU customs data, milling companies in Marseille, Le Havre, and Rouen simultaneously shifted to Canadian suppliers, with some even reverting to domestic wheat, despite a local production drop due to prolonged rain. The stated reasons were unremarkable delivery delays, inconsistent quality, and failure to meet the EU's new carbon and chemical residue standards. But deeper down lies a sense of unpredictability. Importers no longer know whether American shipments will arrive next week, whether they'll be affected by tariff changes, or whether they'll be denied customs clearance due to missing some newly required certificate from the US for the baking industry. Such risks mean cascading losses not just of raw materials, but of reputation. The consequences don't lie in a single rejected shipment. They ripple across the distribution network, factories, and the image of the US in Europe's food value chain. American flour, once a default ingredient in many traditional recipes, is now being replaced by flour from Saskatchewan or Manitoba. And what's notable is how quietly this shift occurred. No protests, no declarations, people simply stopped placing orders. In the US, this isn't just a disappointing sign, it leaves a significant gap in exports. France, one of America's longest-standing partners in refined agricultural trade, used to contribute over $300 million annually to the US wheat industry. This year's decline has cost the Great Plains region hundreds of millions of dollars in just the first quarter of 2025, according to the US Wheat Associates. In Kansas, some cooperatives have been forced to scale back cultivation plans due to the loss of international orders. Many shipments ready for bagging had to be delayed because there weren't enough bulk orders to make transportation efficient. But the bigger concern isn't this year's harvest, it's the choices the next generation is making. In many agricultural towns, young people no longer want to stick with the family farm. Jobs in electric vehicles, AI, or digital supply chains in the cities are far more attractive than standing in the wheat fields waiting for contracts from foreign nations, losing the French market a long-term, trustworthy partner has been described as the final straw in many families' decisions. Meanwhile, up north, Canada is entering an expansion cycle. Since the beginning of the year, Canadian wheat exports to the EU have risen more than 40% compared to the same period in 2024. According to Statistics Canada, France is the strongest growth destination not just because of comparable quality, but because Canadian suppliers meet the EU's new carbon, cleanliness, and traceability standards. Canada's trade policy, especially under the CETA agreement, allows it to access the EU market without the tariff barriers the US faces. Beyond that, Canadian farmers are receiving support to modernize their farms, smart harvesters, climate-controlled storage facilities, and logistics networks programmed in real time. As a result, when an order from Marseille requests 100 tons of flour with exactly 13% protein within 12 days, Canada can confirm within just 6 hours something few American farms are still willing to guarantee. In Saskatchewan, a small town once reliant on potatoes and dairy calves is now expanding into premium wheat exports. A new generation is returning to use drone sprayers, moisture forecasting software, and tools for global commercialization. In this landscape, America's withdrawal from the French market is no longer a temporary misstep. It's like someone who once held the key to the kitchen, now silently and definitively replaced. And when the French no longer care where their flour comes from so long as it's up to standard, on time, and sustainable, then the notion of traditional trust no longer holds weight. People are starting to ask, could France be the first G7 country to openly pivot its agricultural trade toward Canada? And if so, will Germany, Italy, or even Japan, their fellow G7 members, follow suit? Number 3, South Korea. You might think the relationship between South Korea and the US lies only in technology, military affairs, or strategic agreements. But for nearly 40 years, there has been a quiet current that closely connected the two countries' wheat. Since the 1980s, the US has been the largest wheat supplier to South Korea, a market with limited arable land but a strong food processing industry. According to the US Department of Agriculture, USDA, in 2022 alone, the US exported over 1.6 million tons of wheat to South Korea, worth nearly 400 million USD. Korean food companies like Nongshim, Otogi, and SPC all used American wheat in their production of instant noodles, packaged bread, and food-grade flour for convenience store products. There was no diplomatic symbolism in this, just a stable buy-sell relationship lasting decades. But by 2025, what was once as solid as American flour is peeling away in thin layers. From late 2024 to mid-2025, the US wheat market share in South Korea dropped from about 35% to below 17%, according to import data from Korea Agro Fisheries and Food Trade, Corp KT. During the same period, Canada rose from over 20% to more than 60%, far surpassing all other competitors. There was no political crisis, no embargo, not even any public announcement, just a series of Korean businesses, large and small, quietly shifting their supply source. The reason wasn't about price. US wheat was still 8 to 12 USD ton cheaper than Canadian wheat on average. The issue was full chain safety. Over the past 12 months, South Korea increased testing for glyphosate residue, a common herbicide that many Asian countries are tightening control over. US wheat often exceeded recommended levels, fluctuating between 200-400 ppb parts per billion, while wheat from Canada and Australia stayed in the 30 to 70 ppb range, according to Kati's report from May 2025. Being assessed as unclean forced Korean importers to pay more for testing, insurance, and logistics. Instead, they chose Canada, where traceability records are fully digitized, delivery schedules are stable, and strict standards are integrated from the start of the supply chain. At ports like Busan and Incheon, American wheat containers are now sparse. Meanwhile, shipments from Saskatchewan and Alberta in Canada arrive regularly each month. Many logistics companies have adjusted their schedules with domestic processing plants, almost no longer mentioning the US as a primary option. Losing market share in South Korea isn't just a red line on the USDA's charts, it's a real decline for U.S. wheat-growing regions. Washington State, once exporting over 400,000 tons to Korea annually, is now facing a 36% increase in inventory. According to the U.S. Wheat Associates, a milling plant in Spokane had to cut capacity by 20% since April. Farmers in southern Idaho are reducing wheat acreage, switching to flaxseed or livestock feed crops, simply because there are no more long-term contracts. This shift isn't noisy, it's happening quietly, and that's what makes it alarming. When a loyal customer doesn't say no, but never comes back, the seller has no time to react. They just see empty order books, and a once stable market disappear. In Canada, this opens a new chain of opportunities. By leveraging regional trade agreements and improving logistics, Canadian farmers can now sell premium wheat at competitive prices while still meeting technical standards. The federal government supports the digitization of inspections, source traceability, and investment in storage infrastructure. As a result, long-term contracts with South Korea from April 2024 to now have increased by over 75%, and forecasts show more room to expand into other Asian countries. In Manitoba, an agricultural complex near Winnipeg just completed a processing plant specialized for Korean clients. 3 years ago, this area still depended on exporting corn and soybeans. Now it has almost fully shifted to wheat thanks to Asia's demand for clean, precise, transparent supply. This shift isn't just about orders, it tilts the trade balance. The U.S. loses hundreds of millions of dollars in exports, while Canada is becoming a familiar face in food trade negotiations in Seoul. Major Korean supermarket chains are now signing contracts directly with Canadian suppliers, bypassing intermediaries in California or Texas. There was a time when the U.S. was the default choice, but everything changed when trust became unpredictable. No one wants to order from a place where policy might shift after a single vote, or where a shipment could be held due to a new regulation not yet announced. And this isn't just a matter of trade, because if wheat, a staple product with a long-standing relationship, can fracture, people start to ask, are the other pillars between the US and South Korea still as solid as before? South Korea is an economy that values stability and risk control, technology, semiconductors, defense. Larger and riskier sectors need the same. If a relationship once easy to sell, easy to eat like wheat is no longer viable, then what happens if Koreans begin to question the bigger, more complex ones? Number 4, Mexico. This fourth name will surely surprise you, because Mexico is the United States' close neighbor. Mexico used to be one of the most loyal customers of American agricultural products, specifically with wheat. This southern neighbor once imported over 3 million tons per year, accounting for nearly 15% of total U.S. wheat exports, ranking just behind the Philippines and Japan. From instant noodle factories in Monterrey to roadside burrito shops in Tijuana, flour from Kansas, North Dakota, or Montana used to be a familiar part of modern Mexican meals. But over the past 2 years, that familiarity is gradually disappearing. According to preliminary data from Mexican Customs and the North American Grain Association, by mid-2025, Mexico had reduced imports of U.S. wheat by nearly 40%. At the same time, imports from Canada rose by about 35%, and Argentina, a distant supplier, also began making its way onto the stable supply list. There was no announcement from the government, no farewell words, but in reality, Mexico is choosing a different path, a direction that no longer prioritizes the neighbor, once seen as the agricultural patron. This shift doesn't stem from emotion or political conflict. It arises from a pragmatic mindset in the supply chain. Mexico went through a difficult period when several strategic goods had their tariffs suddenly adjusted. Though wheat was not directly affected, the sentiment of passive cooperation spread to other sectors, especially food, where delays can result in losses by the hour, in less than a year. Several contracts for purchasing U.S. wheat were delayed, stalled, or suspended, not necessarily due to technical or commercial issues, but because of last-minute changes in licensing, inspection, or export documentation. When a shipment was stuck at a Texas port due to a change in the declaration form, mills in Sonora were forced to halt production lines. In the food industry, A single day's delay means thousands of disrupted meals and millions of pesos lost in storage and transportation costs. Meanwhile, Canada, never the most traditional partner, proved consistent. No flashy pitches, no deep discounts, just on-time delivery, clear paperwork, and schedules that don't change at the last minute. Since the USMCA was revised, Canada has kept a stable declaration process, while the US introduced updates that forced Mexican businesses to adjust quarterly. No one says Canadian flour tastes better, but in a world where time and stability are gold, Canada has become the more trustworthy partner. And perhaps what should concern the US most is not just losing Mexico, but the fact that Mexico chose Canada as its replacement. A quiet handshake between the two neighbors flanking the US is now quietly creating a new trade corridor, one that doesn't pass through the center. With every wheat shipment from Calgary to Guadalajara, the US's position in the continental supply chain steps back in Canada. The logistics system is being upgraded to meet the growing demand from South American markets. According to the Canada Grain Council (CGC), in Q2 2025 alone, exports to Mexico rose more than 37% year over year. In Manitoba, a warehouse has just completed a wheat protein testing line tailored to the standards of Mexican partners. The government made no official declarations, but the numbers speak for themselves. In contrast, in the US, the losses are tangible. In Texas, a flour blending plant near El Paso had to shut down in June due to a lack of contracts from the South. In Arizona, farmers are having to sell off stored wheat at prices 20% lower than the same period last year due to the lack of buyers. Every ton that doesn't cross the border is a hit to the state budget and a loosening of a once strong trade bond. In the world of trade, trust doesn't crack with a shock. It erodes with every delay, every sudden change, every time a contract goes unrenewed. And here, Mexico is not opposing the US. They're simply choosing the partner that better matches their operational rhythm. This has left many Americans puzzled if even Mexico, the closest and most understanding neighbor, can't wait for one more shipment. Then who will be more patient? Wheat isn't just a grain, it's a trust index. And when that index drops below the warning line, there's no need for more reasons for the customer to walk away. Mexico's quiet pivot isn't isolated. It opens up a bigger question: what happens if other neighboring countries, once treating the US as default, also start seeking new paths? And in the end, can you guess which country will be the next friend? A European nation with extremely strict standards, or a distant market just emerging from crisis, hungry for a safe supply? Number 5, Italy. The last country on the list of 5 that have turned away from American wheat is not a resource-scarce market or an unstable ally. It is Italy, the kingdom of pasta, ciabatta bread, and some of the world's most refined standards for wheat flour quality. When Italy gradually scaled back new contracts for US durum wheat and shifted to Canada, no one saw it as an impulsive decision. It was a quiet but well-considered move to maintain a place in Italy's kitchen. Quality must reach an absolute level of reliability. Italy did not make any clear statements or express the shift in words, but the market spoke for itself. Once one of the top destinations for US wheat over the past decade, Italian pasta manufacturers are now pivoting. They are signing more contracts with Canada and fewer with the US. According to preliminary trade data from 2024 to 2025, Italy imported over 1.8 million tons of wheat, with nearly 830,000 tons being durum wheat, the single most crucial ingredient for traditional pasta. While the import share from Canada rose to nearly 45%, the share from the US dropped to just around 15%. According to data from ISTAT and the European Grain Association, this is not a matter of price, but of adjustments in quality and consistency. Unlike many countries that import wheat to ensure food security, Italy imports to maintain standards. Pasta to them is not just food, it's a symbol. Those golden strands of noodles, just tender enough, are a source of pride served on dining tables in over 100 countries. From Bologna to Naples, each processing plant demands raw materials with balanced moisture, clear protein content, proper elasticity, and on-time delivery. in the past, wheat from the US, was widely trusted by many Italian pasta manufacturers, especially during the 1990s and early 2000s. Many businesses saw it as a symbol of transatlantic cooperation the US supplies. Italy processes, the world enjoys. But in recent years, changes in quality, difficulties in traceability, or delays caused by import-export procedures have gradually eroded that trust. Meanwhile, Canada has quietly invested to rise, not just focusing on yield. They established research centers in Saskatchewan, developed durum wheat varieties tailored for refined processing needs, strictly tested for moisture and composition, and built a highly precise logistics chain. Shipments to ports like Genoa or Bari arrive without delay, without incident. And more importantly, they meet each plant's specific requirements. To Italians, this is more than convenience. They see it as respect. Whoever understands that a slight variation in wheat texture can affect traditional flavor is the one worthy of serving them. And Canada, by listening and adapting, has gradually earned that trust. In artisanal towns like Gragnano, where the hum of dough kneaders follows traditional rhythms, wheat is more than an ingredient. It is spirit, heritage. The people there may not analyze protein or gluten levels, but they know which flour keeps the pasta smooth after boiling, not mushy, not sticky. And flour from Canada is becoming the familiar choice, not because the US has no place, but because the Italian market now demands more than what a price sheet can say. When pasta becomes a top export product, generating billions of euros annually, every processor must weigh their choices carefully. They cannot let a small mistake cause global customers to doubt them. Canada understands that. They don't rush, don't undercut prices. What is a focus on consistency, transparency, and alignment with European standards. That allows them to compete not only in volume, but in trust. And trust, as seasoned chefs all know, must be built batch by batch. What makes Italy's choice particularly striking is the silence. Unlike the Philippines openly canceling orders, unlike France expressing discontent through policy, or Mexico proactively seeking new sources, Italy simply adjusted its supplier list. But in a country where every meal is an expression of culture, choosing ingredients is a deeply meaningful act. Perhaps what makes many Americans feel most disheartened is that they were once confident in winning over some of the most discerning kitchens in the world. U.S. wheat was once present in hundreds of pasta factories across Italy, trusted, used to create globally renowned dishes, but now, that trust is no longer intact. And people are beginning to ask, how can that position be regained? How can Italians once again want to use American flour to craft their iconic meals, not through marketing gimmicks, but through real change, greater consistency, clearer transparency, and most importantly, an understanding that in today's world, agricultural trade is no longer about selling volume. It's about selling credibility, selling commitment, selling cultural awareness. Italy may be the last name in the list of 5 countries that declined further orders from the US, but it is also the most honest mirror reflecting the transformation of global agriculture. They don't say much, they simply choose those who understand them. And in 2025, that country is Canada. 5 countries, 5 different reasons, yet they are all sending the same message. The issue the US is facing is not just about price. Canada has gone one step further, they think long-term. Reinforce stability, invest in technology, quality, and customer trust. The question now is, how can the wheat export industry recover? This is the moment when consumers, farmers, and policymakers all need to reflect together. Because if there is no change, the US may not only lose market share, but also its leadership role on the global food map. And you, the viewer watching this video, what do you think needs to change first? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice is part of a broader conversation. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The analysis in this video is based on current data and an independent perspective, and is not intended to make absolute predictions. We hope this information helps the community reflect and take timely action.